Welcome back to my YouTube channel, guys. It's so great to have you here. I'm grateful that you're tuning in on a regular basis if you are, and wanting to talk today about surrender with you, wanting to share about the nature of surrender. Before I dive in, a couple things to share. As always, if you can give this channel a subscribe if you resonate with it, if you can like this video, maybe leave a comment to share your feedback and how it's resonating and hitting you. That would be greatly appreciated. I'm also doing a 3-day Facebook Live series starting tomorrow, starting on March 19th, going through March 21st, so Tuesday to Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you want to dive deeper into integration, if you've been going through a period in your life where you feel like you're not motivated, you're not inspired, it's calling you into greater slowness, but you may be struggling to really embrace that. If you feel like you've been going through a lot of big life transitions, both externally and internally, and you kind of feel like you've been in a funk perhaps, or you've been going through dark night of the soul in your own experience, and you want to learn more about the nature of integration and how we can actually integrate our experiences versus always being in a period of expansion. If those themes resonate, join me in the link in the comments. In the link in the description. I'll leave my Facebook profile. You can click there, add me as a friend, and join me for the Facebook Lives. Now let's get to it. The nature of surrender. Let's dive deep into that. I think surrender is often misunderstood. And I've seen people talk about surrender in a way where it's almost seen as something weak. It's almost seen as something, like just letting yourself go and just not doing anything, sitting on the couch all day, right? Sometimes people think that's what surrender is, but it's not what surrender is. Surrender really is basically relinquishing control in your life and relinquishing the need to know everything and figure everything out yourself in replacement for a deeper spiritual divine guidance to really direct you in your life. And I think surrender is actually a profoundly courageous act and profoundly courageous decision. And in a way, it's not our decision because life surrenders us for us over time. So ultimately, the deeper we go on our spiritual path, we're almost forced to surrender because the old ways of controlling life, of spiritually controlling life, are simply not aligned anymore and they need to fall apart. So sometimes we're actually forced to surrender. If you ever see people that, go through accidents or suddenly they're in a wheelchair or something happens and it changes their life, right? It's like they're forced to surrender because there's nothing that they can do. And in the beginning, there will be a fight against the change in circumstances, but it is so final and ultimate that the only thing that you can do is more deeply surrender and relinquish any sense of control because there is nothing to control. But there's still an impulse in us that is required to really be open to surrender. Right? It's a spiritual impulse, and that spiritual impulse to surrender can be overshadowed by our desire to make life go our way, right? Even on the spiritual path, I see it a lot. Spirituality has become, in many forms, a way of spiritual materialism. How can I manifest everything I want? How can I build a perfect life? How can I build my dream life? And that's all great and all, but I think a lot of people are still using spiritual concepts and tools to, in a way, exert some level of control over reality and get their way, right? And it's not that surrender is not getting your way. It's just that surrender is really trusting and fully allowing life's way to be the way, and trusting that that way is also the most beneficial and joyful and expansive for you, even though in the short term it might be very challenging and difficult. But I still think there's a nuance to surrender that's misunderstood, that is really about building safety in ourselves to not know how things are going to unfold and to build more safety in the unknown for a period of time. That's often what really strengthens your vessel of surrender, so to say, is really going through phases where there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknown, and you let go of that need to figure it out by yourself. And that can be one of the most scary things, right? To put aside the need to know, to put aside the need to understand, to put aside the need to, even from our personal will, choose the direction for our life, right? That can be very scary because our nervous system just doesn't feel safe in that level of surrender. But ultimately, what I found is that surrender is the highest path, is the highest spiritual path, in the sense that when you allow your own personal will to kind of be put aside and give the divine reins on your life and really be like, I am surrendering to your will, whatever it is that you need me to do. And then when the insights and guidance comes through, what you need to do to embrace that. And oftentimes what happens here, and I can speak from my own experience, is that you get a guidance and then it's inconvenient guidance. It's guidance that's not convenient right now for where you're at. And a part of you is like, no, that's not the right guidance. And so you go back to your usual tools, maybe your addictions, or what you're used to, your spiritual addictions, your addictions to your thoughts, your addictions to your own ideas, your addictions to the way that you think it should all unfold. And you're not ready to really embrace that surrender. And that's okay, because sometimes it takes equity to build up the readiness to really surrender, because it's a death in a way. You're putting aside the need to be in charge of your life, in control of your life. You're putting aside that need, and that can feel, there's a level of emptiness that comes with that. There's a level of emptying out in your mind. You know, let's just say hypothetically, if you were to fully just surrender your whole life to the guidance of the divine in every moment, if spirit would communicate with you, you would go for that. You would trust it with no inhibition. And if spirit would not communicate with you, you would just stop, and you would just stop in your tracks. You wouldn't try to figure it out yourself. If that was the case, hypothetically speaking, there wouldn't be so much to think about, right? Because a lot of the times what our mind is occupied with, what our mind is thinking about, I would say 80-90% of the time is figuring things out, thinking about the past, thinking about the future and what we're going to build and where we're going to go, and trying to understand and conceive of the unknown that we're yet not meant to actually know about. And so a lot of our thoughts, at least that's what I've experienced in myself, because of a deeper underlying unsafety, is spiraling around figuring out life, right? Figuring out what to do, figuring out how to get out of the situation, figuring out how to change this circumstance into another circumstance that's more favorable and pleasant, right? And so what I've noticed is when you're truly in a state of surrender, there is actually much less to think about, because there is nothing to figure out. Because when you are in a state of surrender and you are surrendering to the divine, then everything that needs to be known, the clarity that needs to be known for your path to unfold, will be given to you in the right moment when you need to know it. And before that, you don't need to know it. And sometimes life on purpose withholds information from you because it wants to detox you from that need to spiritually or contextually understand everything in life. And that is, I think, one of the last spiritual addictions that we have. And I speak from experience. I love that stuff, right? I love thinking about things from a very deep spiritual level and growth level. But what I've learned on my journey, especially in the recent years, is that is actually the place where I hide. That is the place where I'm still trying to exert, trying to stay in charge, where I'm not letting go, where I'm not relinquishing that control, because trying to figure things out through my mind, through my spiritual mind, is still a sense of control that I'm trying to exert, not consciously, but on a subconscious level. And so I think a lot of times the last kind of addiction that we face, that we have to overcome, is the addiction to understanding everything. Because the deeper you go on the spiritual path, especially into the path of surrender, there's less and less to understand. There's only that to understand that you know in any given moment. And there will be, the more emptied out you are in your mind from all the figuring out energy, there will be clarity, there will be answers that will come through more and more. And if you have a question, if you need to know, so if you feel like you need to know something, you can ask, and then if it's meant to be known, it comes through. But it's not like we're in charge of those answers. And if life wants to detox us from our spiritual mind, from our spiritual thinking, from trying to figure out life all the time, if we're hiding in that, then it will just transmit the energy of silence, because it wants you to detox from that. And that, in my experience, one of the most challenging things to go through, because a part of you is just feels so unsafe to really just not understand. And in that, what dies is all of the spiritual concepts and ideas that we've collected up till this point, that maybe in the past have helped us, but now they're simply outdated. The rules have changed, the rules of the game have changed, and now we actually need to let go of these ideas that they are the truth, and feel into the deeper momentary truth of divine guidance that comes through spontaneously, right? Versus being a fixed concept, so to say. And so surrender is when we are open to really trust that the way of the divine is the way that ultimately benefits us the most, even if in the short term it's challenging, uncomfortable, moves us through a process of inconvenience and difficulty. Because that's how we're purging, right? That's how we purge all the stuff that's not ultimately our true nature. If we are willing to embrace that, that's the path of surrender. And also the path of surrender is actually the surrender of going through the inner conflict and fight, of actually being willing to embrace that, because we bottom out, and like the ego starts to release in portions, right? It's not all at once. When people say ego death, now the whole ego is gone. Probably not, right? Most likely not. It's a portion, right? It's a portion, portion at a time. Because if your ego would be released in one go, integrated in one go, it would be too much for your nervous system to handle. It would be too much change. So there is a purpose in the ego releasing in portions, right? In certain percentages at a time. And so the path of surrender really begins when we go through that detox process of more and more waking up out of our ideas, waking up out of our addiction, waking up out of our spiritual impulses, or spiritual impulse is not the right word, but spiritual needs to understand, right? To contextualize and analyze everything from a deep spiritual level. The path of surrender begins when you don't feel a resonance anymore on some level, on a deeper level, to be the one in charge of creating your life, right? Maybe like spiritual teachings of law of attraction, manifestation. In the past, you were like, boo, gung-ho, but now you're like, all this stuff feels empty. All this stuff doesn't feel like it's actually the deepest truth. It actually contains the depth that I'm resonating with, that my soul is resonating with, right? And so that's really the beginning path of surrender, is like that stuff, like it doesn't click the same way anymore. You yearn for depth, you yearn for mature spiritual insights, and because you have a deep yearning to fully and wholeheartedly awaken to your true nature, right? And so the nature of surrender is mostly about surrendering the need to be in charge and going through that uncomfortable process of sometimes for a specific period of time, being in the unknown and learning to make peace with that, and learning to relinquish and restrain from that need to understand and figure everything out. Love the one that is feeling unsafe, that is trying to figure everything out. Love that part of you because it comes from a deeper unsafety, but also being intentional about just not going with that so much, right? And then when we embrace the path of surrender, it is the most delicious, ultimately delicious path, because there's a deep freedom in not being in charge, in a way that you are just surrendered to a higher guidance that you trust wholeheartedly, and you move in accordance to that. And the more you do that, the more you are in alignment, the more you feel actually, oh yeah, this is right. Like, this is actually creating more nourishment and happiness and freedom and joy in my life, versus me trying to be in charge, figuring everything out by myself. That's more and more seen as exhausting and stressful. Where in the beginning of the path, being in charge feels empowering and feels like you're the creator of your life. But then you wake up to a deeper path, where you're not really in charge. You're in charge of executing the guidance that you receive. You're in charge of, in some way, following through on the kernels of wisdom and truth that communicate with you. But you're not in charge of figuring out. You're not in charge of trying to create it, make it work. That's the path of surrender. And it is a very worthwhile path. But in the beginning, it can be challenging and difficult. And I wanted to provide you with this nuance to give you a deeper understanding of it. Again, if you want to learn more about the path of surrender, more about integration, navigating dark night of the soul when nothing seems to be going your way, join me tomorrow, Tuesday, March 19th, 11 a.m. Pacific time, for a Facebook Live. I'll be going live for 3 days, going very deep and intimate. We'll be sharing about my upcoming Dark Night of the Soul program, where I'm going to be supporting and guiding people through navigating the stage of surrender and dark night. So there will be so much to learn and extract in these 3 days. I'm excited. If you were to join, that would be awesome. And you can always watch the replays if you're not able to join on time. For now, for today, sending you so much love, appreciation, care. We're doing this. If you're watching this, you're on your path. You're exactly where you're meant to be. And more glory shall come our way.